Hello, this is Purposeful Porsha, and thank you for joining us again for another episode of Beneath the Surface. Today's episode, we're speaking about body. Body for those people who are dealing with traumatic relationships and in a relationship with a narcissist. Today, join with us, we have Dr. Mickey Phillips, who is a well-respected internal medicine physician out of Wilmington, Delaware, with over 30 years experience in practice. She specializes in preventive care, chronic disease management, and whole body wellness. She currently is practicing at MD VIP, offering personalized patient-centered care. We are pleased to have Dr. Phillips with us today, and tune in for a wonderful episode of Beneath the Surface. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Phillips, for being a part of Beneath the Surface. We appreciate you being here today. And again, we are speaking about the physical side, the body side of being in a relationship that's traumatic or being in a relationship with a narcissist. So I have a few questions that I definitely know that you can pour some, good advice into each listener and people who are watching. The first question is, can you explain the gut-brain connection and how chronic stress or trauma in a toxic relationship can disrupt your digestive or gut health?
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure knowing you, and you and I have known each other professionally. So as an internist, I'm a board certified physician in internal medicine. Our job is to focus on adult health and the spectrum of health, and that can encompass, physical things as well as emotional things. I think health is as much about emotional wellness as it is physical wellness. So one of the areas that is being hotly studied is around gut health, the gut microbiome. We do believe that there are many of the physiological symptoms of the body that are tied or can be tied back to gut health. And we know that when gut health is off or not well, and that can show itself up in many ways: GI symptoms, abdominal pain, nausea, bloating, bowel changes, that any of those symptoms, which can be very distressing and have a big effect on someone's health and well-being, the cause of that can be definitely physical, but I do believe in a big mind-body connection, and I think emotional issues can absolutely disrupt gut flora, gut health. And so when someone is under a tremendous amount of emotional strain, particularly the strain that comes from, say, an abusive relationship, it can definitely take its toll in physical ways. I think that the body intuitively knows when it's under stress, when it's under pressure, and sometimes it's easier for your mind to wrap itself around physical symptoms as a warning than it can be to kind of grapple with the emotional symptoms. So oftentimes we find that people who are in the midst of a toxic relationship or dealing with a narcissistic partner, their feelings, their stress comes out in their gut health. And so I find that the two are often tied, and oftentimes what we'll find is patients will come in complaining of various symptoms. I don't feel well, my bowels are off, I don't feel good when I eat, I'm constantly having abdominal pain, vague symptoms, which can mean very real physiological problems, but oftentimes when you kind of clear out the cobwebs and you dig underneath that, the cause of that, the nidus of the pain or the symptoms, can be from emotional stress. So I find that the two are inextricably linked. And when we start to get at some of the emotional symptoms, oftentimes the physical symptoms get better.
So the reason why I love this question, people who watched our first episode with the mind, the mental health side of it, I did mention my track record of being in a relationship with a narcissist or just being in traumatic relationships and doing research for myself, creating questions for this segment, I got so emotional because I was always teased or targeted like, oh, you're always sick. I was always sick because I was in a traumatic relationship with a narcissist.
Absolutely.
And I do have, I gained so many allergies. I do have traces or telltale signs of IBS. And my gut health is horrible, right? And so when I came upon like different traits of a person who, has these multitude of symptoms such as myself, it always comes back to you are in a ridiculous traumatic relationship. And it's not only just that, like, and when you're in this emotional type of atmosphere, you emotionally eat and you're cramming the wrong crap in your face, right? And so you're already under stress and trauma, and then you go pop some Doritos. Like, it's just so I wasn't helping it, and I know I'm not the only one that had these issues, and you don't know what's going on with you, and it never dawned on me, never in a million years did it ever dawn on me that I just have a screwed up partner, or you know what I mean, or just a very toxic environment, whether it was your partner or whether it was your parent.
True.
If you grow up in that type of environment, you're always sick, your ulcers, just feeling some type of way. It's just the atmosphere that's making you feel like that.
Well, I think that having a toxic partner is certainly not a trait that is unique to you. I think back to a time being involved with a very toxic, narcissistic partner in medical school, and certainly realizing that I was someone whose stress kind of came out in my gut, my belly, and trying to understand the connection between why do I feel so badly all the time, stomach in knots, bowels changing up and down, bloated, and just feeling generally unwell. And it's hard when you're involved in a toxic relationship and there's no exchange, there's no give and take, there's no reflection, there's no accountability, a lot of gaslighting. So you end up trying to internalize or try to dissipate some of those feelings, and you have nowhere to push that outside. Yes. So oftentimes it comes in, and the way that many of us deal with those kinds of stressors, it comes out in your gut and in your belly. And so it wasn't until the realization that when that relationship thankfully ended, and then suddenly those problems went away, you're like, maybe I wasn't the problem.
Right.
And how interesting it is that gut health seemed to get better. Not everyone, I think, is as tied to their physical symptoms in their intestinal tract as others, but I do think there is a powerful kind of mind and body connection. And I do think that, the psyche can be very protective. And when you're struggling so hard to deal with something very emotional and you can't articulate it or you can't find a way to get it out, it comes out in physical symptoms.
I think right now people are starting to hear the phrase gut brain. I mean, that wasn't something that I heard a few years back.
No. And we talk a lot about intestinal migraines, like
I've never
migraine
heard that
headaches. Okay, so intestinal migraines. So people who have these, paroxysms, these spasms of these intense abdominal pain, that while there may be no direct physiological cause, there isn't a tumor, there isn't a vascular problem per se, along the lines of kind of irritable bowel, that these intense headaches of the gut, can happen for people with extreme stress. And oftentimes the things that make a lot of these symptoms better are indeed some of the same medicines that we use for mood. We know that the neurochemicals, the transmitters that are involved in passing the signals for pain are very similar and overlap a lot to those that handle mood. And so there is a big connection between pain and emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, like I said, it's easier for the mind to protect itself and make things physical and focus you on the physical as a way of getting out emotional issues. So,
I'm pretty sure we're going to get a lot of feedback because I know I'm not the only one whose stomach got all gassy after an argument. I'm pretty sure it's other people. Um, Another question: is it true that prolonged emotional stress can weaken the immune system, and how might that manifest in someone's daily health?
well, absolutely. I think the simplest way I kind of think about it, and I talk to patients about, is the fight or flight mechanism and the chemicals that are released under stress, under duress, when someone's in a fight or flight response. We know that there is an upregulation of hormones and of systems in the body that kind of prime you.
Mm-hmm.
For a fight to recognize a foreign body, a foreign entity, an allergen, an immunopathogen. But over time, constantly being on that kind of hypervigilance can wear you down.
Yes.
And we do find that the prolonged, stimulation of that sort of system can flatten over time. So you find people who are under chronic stress, constant stress, and the release of some of those stress hormones are more prone to viruses, illnesses, fatigue, various symptoms. And it's not just in people's minds. And so, absolutely, we know that one of the precursors to the development of premature dementia is the chronic exposure to stress. When you are under stress, you don't sleep well. You don't sleep well with good, ordered, regular sleep. We know your immune system can be suppressed. There's so much of a connection between intense stress, prolonged stress, and your inability to fight off or do the things your body normally can healthily do.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, I mean, I was always sick. I mean, I have, and it's so crazy because when I did get out of that toxic relationship, it was like I wasn't sick. When I got sick, it was COVID. But in my brain, I'm still like, I'm always sick. But no, truthfully, no, I'm not. Like, I'm not sick. And it's crazy.
It's that, phrase of, I think they're the derivation of the phrase sick and tired. The two tend to go hand in hand. You get sick and tired, and you literally are sick and tired. And just that chronic exposure to stress, to worry, to grief, to anger. All of those emotions can be very overwhelming, but they can also overwhelm our immune system. So, we certainly think that there is a big connection between ordered sleep and healthy eating and mindfulness and mood regulation and stabilization and healthy living.
Yeah, and for my practice, even in the midst of all that, I did have the know-how to put lavender on my pillow, have like the rain in the background or the waves so I can go to sleep. I needed a place, a way of escape, right?
Yes.
And so I needed to have like, I can, aromatherapy, what is it? Sound bathing, just taking like showers with sugar scrubs. Like I was trying to find an escape, and that gave me some sense of relaxation for my body to stop getting like butterflies in a hole.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's almost like you're like that, and then you get like the nerves because you don't know if you want to walk in the house. You don't know if you want to like say anything, so you go on mute, and then you start. So I know I also helped the situation by not having someone to talk to.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I didn't do my part to help myself get well outside of leaving the relationship, but in the middle of it, I was shutting my immune system down in addition to what was going on. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And I have a good friend who's a therapist who we were talking the other day about a study that was just released, and I'm paraphrasing the study. My apologies that I don't have the exact data there, but basically, they looked at a cohort of people, and there were people who were exposed to going outside into nature, spending time in a forest, spending time in a beautiful garden, and they tracked their health and wellness and less incidences of colds and of viruses and of major illnesses. Then they even took people who didn't necessarily spend time in the forest or in the gardens, but they showed them pictures, and then they gave them aromatherapy smells that would evoke the feelings of being in a forest or being in a garden. Then they had people who they had them spend significant time just in a room with four walls without exposure to anything. And what they found was that even the people who were in a room shown pictures. Now, they weren't outside in nature, and they were given artificial aromatherapy around the smells of nature, consistently did better, were sicker, even had a perception of their wellness that was better over the people who had no exposure to any of those things. So what does that tell us? That just as the mind has an incredible ability to make you feel sick in a toxic environment, remove yourself out of that environment, and the same mind can make you feel well and whole. And so we do talk a lot and want to work a lot with patients, not just from the physical side, but to help you get to a place of emotional wellness and recognizing that you can help yourself feel better, that your body can respond to the mind telling it that it's healthy and well once you get out of one of those relationships.
Absolutely. Another question is, are there medical interventions, and you kind of touched on it, or lifestyle practices, we just touched on that, like anti-inflammatory diets, hormonal panels, or sleep aids that support recovery for emotional abuse?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, I don't think you can overstate, and I've said it a couple times already, but this powerful mind to body connection, and while certainly therapeutics, medications, interventions like cognitive behavioral therapy, those sorts of things have very real evidence-based medicine science backed behind it as effective therapies for trauma and for dealing with toxic relationships of all sorts. We also know there's significant benefit from more holistic things, mindfulness, meditation, as you said, sound bathing, massage, touch therapy, hug therapy, aromatherapy, evoking some of the other senses. All of those things can be very soothing, very holistic, but very therapeutic. And what's refreshing about that, because there still, I think, is a stigma around the traditional treatments of emotional issues with medications. And while they have their place, I think what seems to be a lot more acceptable is a more holistic approach. So I try to talk to my patients about the things that they can do in their own environments easily and naturally that can help support improved health. And so, like, a good candle, a good piece of chocolate, the sound of a baby laughing, the feel of snuggling with a puppy, a good hot shower, getting outside and getting a little bit of exercise and fresh air. All of these things can certainly be helpful and helping someone transition from a place of feeling less than or feeling overwhelmed by a toxic relationship and being more empowered to take control of their health.
One thing I discovered was during that time, especially getting into meditating, but grounding. And so I never realized how powerful like my bare feet would be on like cold grass or warm grass, and just sitting outside listening to the singing bowls, and then I would have burning would be pure frankincense and myrrh, like the real incense stones, and I at times would just sit still, not say anything, and it would just be uncontrollable tears, but it was just stress being released. And I never realized how important just my bare feet on grass could just really just be so moving. So grounding is really therapeutic. I don't know if you've ever done that, but it just moved me to a point where I'm like, why didn't I do it? Oh, because my mom said, don't be walking around here.
Put some shoes on.
Don't be coming in out here like, yeah, that's what that was about.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's funny because I think that there is and it's a bit different than maybe when we were growing up with so much technology, being so driven around technology. But I think that there is something to even just learning to be still.
Yep.
And I find that my children especially have a hard time really being still.
I think we're overstimulated.
Absolutely. For more than 140 characters or, 5 minutes for the time it takes to doom scroll and it's really hard for them to just sit and be. And so there it can almost be a fear to that of slowing down and of stopping. But I think what I've been trying very much, and I try very hard to work with my patients to meet them where they are on the road, but to in a way that to do things that I myself would want to do. I approach my patients, how would I want to be treated? And so I find myself having a hard time slowing down, of stopping and of being still. And when I'm feeling very overwhelmed or very overstimulated, needing someone to almost remind me stop and just breathe. But I do think that there is something to a really good mindfulness practitioner, someone who's really good with massage or someone who's really good in teaching techniques around meditation. And that's what is so, I think, wonderful. The good side of technology is that there are so many apps and there's so much media access to how to practice grounding, how to meditate, how to, follow this app and calm and all of these things that you can. So, the good side about technology is that is so much more accessible. But the downside is I do think we find it really hard to disconnect.
A lot of people, especially in this space of being in narcissistic or trauma relationships, when you get out, you're toggling in between trying to find yourself, be yourself, and find some peace. So how does emotional trauma affect cardiovascular health? And can heartbreak or chronic stress actually damage your heart?
Oh, yes, and yes. There is a documented syndrome called broken heart syndrome that we see most often in situations where, say, you have a partnership, a marriage, a couple that's been married 40 or 50 years, and one of the partners suddenly dies. And just the emotional stress of watching their partner pass away, or the sudden stress of that. I mean, again, the flood of those chemicals puts so much strain on the heart that actually the heart develops its own form of cardiomyopathy and begins to behave in a sick sort of way. And they have found that does very real damage to the heart, and that may take time to overcome, very much like a heart that's been damaged from a heart attack. Certainly, again, the body is very sensitive to stress and the chemicals and the hormones that are produced around stress. So we do see increasing in stress as a risk factor independently for cardiovascular disease. We see patients under stress being at increased risk for arrhythmias. We see people under stress being at increased risk for some of those muscular problems with how the heart functions itself. So, yes, it is very real that under prolonged stress or under duress, that the heart itself can be affected. And the lingering aspects of that may need to be medicated and can persist even long after the incident that caused the toxicity. Long after that's resolved.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, for myself, I had back-to-back trauma. I didn't have anything per se like high blood pressure, or I didn't have like cardiovascular issues at all. What I did was I tipped over into pre-diabetes. Going from a traumatic relationship, then going through divorce, then going through my father getting sick, my best friend dying, my other best friend dying. It was just too much. And trying to hold it in, the gut issues, and then just trying to work something away. Next thing you know, my doctor's like, well, now you're pre-diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I just did not realize, like when they say, boy, stress can really take you out, it can really take you out.
Really, and I know your doctor, and I know that she was all over that.
And she wasn't playing with me.
Was not. Was not.
She wasn't playing with me at all. And it's kind of like, we're going to take care of this, and we're going to take care of this really fast,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to do it. Like, and I do a nod to, my doctor, Alexia. She does believe in both, the natural and, homeopathic. Is it homeopathic?
Mm-hmm.
As well as she's internal medicine like yourself. So she does, just like yourself, understand the balance of both. And that's refreshing.
Well, I think, and so, we have this conversation as internists, because I have the sincere pleasure of knowing Dr. Musatos, your physician, well. She is the best in the business. And I think we are very aligned and alike in our thought process about how the things that you can control in your environment, diet and exercise and living well, have a tremendous impact on your overall physical health. We have the pre-diabetes conversation regularly in our offices. And, just today I was talking to a patient around, okay, you're pre-diabetic. What does that mean, and what can I do about it? And, we talk by starting with the simple things, living well as best as you can as possible, living peacefully and mindfully in your own space, a little bit of healthy eating, whole eating, and a little bit of exercise goes a long way, and hopefully helping you kind of dial down that internal inflammation, and putting you on a path of keeping you from developing full-blown diabetes. But you can have a tremendous impact on that. And many patients who, through not necessarily a focus on losing weight, because I don't think, while certainly weight loss in and of itself is a wonderful tool, it isn't the only tool.
Correct.
And so, but again, around mindfulness, around peacefulness, and I've been doing a lot of talking around, because in trying to find my own way to a more peaceful, healthy path, can you get out and, get a little bit of exercise and fresh air? I recently took up rowing, and as a way to get outside and be on the water and get some exercise, and kind of feeling myself being stagnant and stressed all the time, and that balled up face of living that on the inside as well as on the outside, just stress. And it has made a significant difference in just my ability to kind of, woosah, as we like to say, on a physical and emotional level. But, again, we know the connection between prediabetes and your inability to healthily manage your blood glucose, which just causes generalized inflammation throughout your body and can increase your risk for things like heart attacks and strokes. So, we do want you to try to be more mindful around that, and doing things that you can do to help bring some of that global internal stress down.
And one thing I do want to say to everyone who's listening and watching, don't do what I did. I tried to transfer one thing to the other. So I figure if I escape my traumatic relationship for X amount of hours, I'll just throw it into work, or just throw it into being super mom. But you still have the same stressor. You're just trying to pivot it to a whole nother way. You're not addressing the problem itself. And so, because I was vegan, raw vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian.
I remember.
Everytarian.
No good quality snacks.
So,
none whatsoever.
Just dry and cardboard. But it wasn't that I was eating wrong. It was just I was internalizing all of that stress, and just being like a downfall for myself with all of my medical issues and stuff. So yeah. I have one more question. How do you, as a physician, partner with therapists or trauma coaches to provide holistic healing for patients who've experienced relationship trauma?
Oh, that's a good question. And I think women particularly can relate to this because I do think it's it's a holistic approach. As an internist, I don't labor into the delusion that there's one magic thing that I can do. But I do very much enjoy working in partnership with my care practitioners of all types. Personally, I think that everybody should have a therapist. I have a therapist.
I have a therapist.
I think everybody should have a therapist.
Love my therapist.
I do as well. And I'm famous for quoting her any number of times.
Mm-hmm.
And many of the people in my life get what we call secondary therapy by constantly asking me to quote therapy speak from my good friend and therapist. But I think it's really important because, I'm a physician, and so I've spent my career taking care of the physical body, as a scientist, as a clinician, that is my job. But I do powerfully believe in the expertise and the coaching and the guidance that is provided by, say, our mental health practitioners. I know specifically here in Delaware, we suffer tremendously from lack of enough good quality providers across the board. I mean, we are near the bottom of the 50 states in access to primary care. We're about the same when it comes to access to mental health practitioners. I think that there is a lot to be said about a good therapist, be that a licensed clinical social worker or a licensed psychotherapist, that can be in the form of clergy, your pastor. I know I've been encouraging my mom to seek a little bit of therapy around some trauma that she's had in her life recently. And as a woman of color, of a certain generation, while she may not necessarily be comfortable with traditional therapy, she does have a very good friend in the pastor of our church. And so reaching out for some spiritual counseling. And I think it's important to address all the aspects of health and wellness, and that we all need to work together. I try very hard to encourage my patients to, when they need to, seek out a good therapist or supportive team around them. So I do think it's very important to employ practitioners across the spectrum.
We're all like, I love my therapist. But you know what we do, and I think you kind of mentioned it. When everyone is pro therapy and you all get together and you shoot a little bit of, this is what my therapist shared with me. It is so refreshing because you learn things from different angles.
Absolutely.
Or you get cross therapy. And just even how therapists are so thought provoking, and they pull things out of you, and they're skilled to listen and try to make you see things in a different light. But I love talking to my friends who are pro therapy and they know it's okay not to be okay, and to talk amongst themselves, because you learn new things. And when I talk to my other friends and they say, yeah, I've talked to my therapist and they shared this with me, I enjoy that, and I also enjoy the fact that we're all now open in this day and age, that we're all messed up. We're all jacked up and we all need some help. And now it's not such a negative stigma that you can't share how you're able to navigate through this thing called life.
Yes.
This messy journey of just trying to make it through to the next day, because none of us know how to handle things. We just know how to get through our lessons that we just learned.
Absolutely. I think one of the things I've found in my own personal journey is that, outside of being a doctor, I'm just one person, one woman, but, it really was kind of a difficult journey to get to a place of being open to therapy. I think for a lot of reasons, there's a bit of marginalization and kind of disenfranchisement of the Black community.
Yeah, we go to church.
We don't. And and not without good reason. I think that there are a lot of reasons why we have felt very skeptical and wary of the therapeutic process of all kinds. And I do think it's important that you find someone who can relate to you. Now, while it's not necessary, and my therapist is not a Black woman, but there's enough commonality there that I think it works.
Yeah.
But it is really important that if you can, that's why we so desperately need, I think, more therapists who look like you, who look like me, more women in that space, more women of color, more men of color, more representation and therapists among the LGBTQ community, because there is I find there's a commonality, a shared kind of existence, and there's a trust inherently that happens when someone looks like you or can share your experience.
Yeah.
So I think even talking about therapy amongst Black women, amongst women of color, or even communities of color or who have been othered, it's really important to find a safe space. I think that phrase kind of gets bantered around a lot, but there's something to be said for the therapeutic process, and I'm very active in engaging my patients to avail themselves of that, because I do think it's helpful in good times and bad. You need someone who is trained to help you deal with emotional issues of stress, some feedback that can be unbiased, just in the same way that you would go to a mechanic to fix your car and you would go to an accountant to do your taxes. I think there's a real space and a value, more so in sometimes the things that I can offer, that therapy can provide, as one supportive arm.
I think the fact that we're now open to understanding mental health and how it's aligned with the physical is extremely important. Now we're in a generation and we're in a space now where we're more open to it and more open to learning how to get well.
Yeah, no.
You know? So, but I did say that was my last question, but I lied just a little bit, because I have something that that so many of us, especially females, are dealing with. Why do many survivors in traumatic relationships report insomnia, weight gain or weight loss, and extreme fatigue while in recovering from those relationships?
Well, I think for a long time, women in particular were globally gaslit into thinking that emotional outbursts and overwhelming emotion was women were crazy.
Yeah.
And there's been so much study that have debunked the very real physiological changes that happen in a body under stress. But if you think about it in general, like the word hysterectomy comes from, again, the derivation of the word hyster, which is related to women and crazy. And for so long, like emotional things were labeled as insanity. But again, and we've touched on this a few different times, but the very real physiological connection, symptoms are real. Physical symptoms are a manifestation oftentimes of emotional duress, of any type. And oftentimes when we peel away, and of late I'm finding this more and more, even though we're through the pandemic and we've come through that time, I'm still finding a lot of stress and of trauma in my patients. And when you settle things out and labs are normal and blood pressure is fine and medications are stabilized and people still aren't feeling well, that really is coming from a place of emotional lack of well-being. There's so much of a connection, and I really hope that as time goes on, that we can do more evidence-based medicine around some of the treatments and therapies that are aimed at helping emotional well-being as a way to get at physical well-being. And we are seeing that more and more, how ordered regular, we're spending a lot of time talking about like sleep hygiene, how ordered regular sleep, 7 to 9 hours of sleep a day, can be restorative, can be therapeutic, can be a treatment in and of itself of so many things. So again, yes, and yes, we need to do a better job, I think, of looking at emotional health and well-being and dealing with those symptoms as a way to get at improved physical health.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I tell you, when I don't have my melatonin, I just can't. I don't know if it's perimenopause or whatever it is. If I don't get my sleep, like I'm literally staring at the walls, and I can't get my body to shut down until like I have to like scroll until I can't do it anymore to make myself fall asleep.
Which is actually counterproductive to what's happening. I think one of the things as women physicians that many of us are finding much more refreshing, but sadly, it really has only been in the last decade or so that significant studies are really starting to turn towards women's health issues, particularly on the issue of perimenopause. I mean, it wasn't until late in the 1980s and 90s that women were even considered as test subjects in clinical trials. All studies for lots of medications and therapeutics have been based on men, white men at that mostly, and data has been extrapolated to women. So it really is around these last few years that we're starting to see the rise of not only these powerful movements within the female OBGYN medical community and space, but really driving improved education around women's health issues and perimenopause. I know, not to reveal, but I know that you had mentioned that one of your future podcasts is going to be around perimenopause. And so, it's really exciting to kind of see some of those issues really come to the forefront and talk about. We could talk days around how your symptoms, and let me our tell symptoms you, of perimenopause.
That is a subject that I might have to have like a long
that would be a good panel discussion.
Yes. Strong J.
Yeah.
That would be the panel discussion, because that right there is that is our now. Right now. Like, perimenopause is the new now.
Yes. So that should be our other Kilo Low and Bunquisha. Our other podcast.
That is the next podcast. So definitely look out for that episode. But wrapping up, it's so refreshing to talk about this. And also, this is therapeutic for me because I'm sharing my own space. And that's kind of like what podcasts are, where you open up your own personal doors to other people to let them know that they're not alone. And I do appreciate you as, a good friend of mine, as well as, she's my doctor also on this side. I'd be like, help me. So it's good to have these conversations where she's known me, seen me through this trials of my own life, and how I have now, I'm in my Zen mode, and what she says, I'm mother love. So just
very much so. Very much so.
But thank you for coming out. I greatly appreciate all of your advice. And for more information for Dr. Phillips, give them some information on you so if they want to get in contact with you.
Again, while we talked a lot holistically about, therapy and things, I am Dr. Phillips. I'm not Dr. Phil. I do not, manifest any sort of true, mental health certification. But I am, again, a board certified internist. I am in private practice in Wilmington, and available and taking new patients, and very much excited to take good care of adults and just participate in their journey of health and wellness.
Thank you again for being a part of this amazing podcast. And thank you, and tune into our next episode for Soul and Spirit. We're going to touch on being in a relationship with a narcissist and trauma in soul and spirit. Thank you for joining Beneath the Surface.